My name is Dustin Kelly, but everybody calls me DJ. I'm prior Army, serving as both a Ford observer and a military police officer. I spent the last 14 and a half years as a police officer and detective in a large metropolitan police department. Two things that I've learned throughout my career. One, everybody has a story to tell. And two, the best stories are true. This is the DTD Podcast.
They didn't want to hear it. They certainly didn't want it. The public or the government didn't want to tell the public such things. It was bad enough that there was coffins coming in through Wisson Bassett every week. But they certainly didn't want for those acts of cruelty. There should have been no surprise to anybody that understands Afghanistan, that has an understanding of the history of Afghanistan. That act of cruelty, those acts of cruelty, shouldn't come as a surprise, really, to anybody. But because we've all become soft in the UK, we're all soft. Everyone's soft. That kind of information just doesn't go down well. And there was lots of those things. And I'm sure from all the men and women who served in Afghanistan, and all of us who said to people, this is not going to end well. But we were all told to, shut up, stand down, don't say things like that. And all the bullshit that went back to, the White House or went back to Westminster or to Whitehall about this is not going well, this is not working. We can't fix this. It was all ignored. Right up till that last suicide bomb at Kabul airport. All ignored. And that is something that I think it will always anger me, is how politicians all over Europe, UK and America either ignored or chose to ignore or suppress just how bad things were. There was really no chance of success. I've always been a big believer. I'm a bit old school. People talk about British history, and it's something that I'm not allowed to talk about because, when Great Britain had the empire, we kind of ruled 2/3 of the world, and it's like, but now no one wants to talk about that. Well, we can't talk about that because, of all the suppression and the racism and the slavery and stuff like that. And I've always been a big believer in if you're going to invade a country, invade it, take it over, kill everybody, don't leave. Or leave it alone. Just don't go in. Leave it alone. And there's so many points in history that have told us that. The Balkans. And you could write the art of war. You could rewrite the art of war in 2 pages. Don't go to war in the Balkans. Don't go to war in the Middle East. And that's it. That's the art of war. And we've never, and I say we, I mean us Western countries, the UK, the America, we've never really understood things like the tribal system. We've never understood it. We've always had one leader. That's the leader of the country. That's the president. That's the prime minister. And we've never really understood that that's not how the majority of countries in the world work. That's not how it works in the continent of Africa. It's not how it works in Asia. It's not how it works in the Middle East, in Iraq.
They don't work at our pace either. Like the pace is different. Like our concept of time and their concept of time, completely different.
But sorry, so I'm rambling. I'm really sorry. Afghanistan was the most difficult for me.
No, and I'd love to hear this because I know Chuck likes to talk about this stuff too, and I think it's a good point. But what I do think happened there was we saw, and Chuck and I had talked about this before the show, mental health and dealing with everything that you're seeing in these countries, and it builds and it builds and it builds over time. You saw your breaking point was when they ask you what it's like. I know mental health is very important to you, Neely. Did you see through this time period when you're going through Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, all these different countries, did you see a piece of your mental health going away, or was it an abrupt kind of traffic accident when it all came out?
It only happened when I was home. As bizarre as
Okay.
that sounds, it only happens when it was.
But now you're at home all the time.
Well, I am, but I'm under different circumstances. So there was I think after maybe my fourth year of being there, and it was so bizarre because I loved going home to see my wife, my ex-wife now, to see my children. I missed my children terribly. And when I got home, I wanted to come back. I wanted to. I was emailing people and asking about certain jobs. How did that go? Did we get a result on that? Did you put that report in? Did you? And it was like, you're on leave. What are you doing? I said, well, I just want to know. I just want to know. And whenever I left my home to come back, I was always sad to come back. I used to hate leaving my children. My God, people used to say to me, "Well, it must get easier the more times you do it." And it's like, do you know what? It doesn't. So I always used to get my flight booked at the latest one at night time, so that I could go through my routine with my kids. So I could take them up to bed. I could read them a story, and they would fall asleep. And when they woke up in the morning, Dad was gone. Because to do it any other way was I was being a little bit selfish, to be honest, but to do it any other way was torture for me. To see my kids, waving at the living room window as I'm it was even now I think back in it, it was torture for me.
Let me ask you something though, Neely. And you talking about this brings us back to the very first of this conversation when you talked about your adopted father and the routine that he did with you every night. And that was the last time you saw him, was the routine. That has got to have something to do with all of this that you're saying now.
Well, I'm going to tell you this, DJ, because this might. So I've got two older kids from my first marriage. My son is oh my goodness, my son's what, 34, and my other son is 20. Oh my goodness, 27, 28. He's in the army as well. When they were kids, I was a terrible father. An absolute terrible father. And I explained that. I've had this conversation with my kids years and years ago when me and their mother divorced. And I had, as they were older, when they could understand it. But I spoke to both of them saying, listen, I know I was a really bad father. I was never there. I was very, very young. I wanted to get my career going a little bit, so I would be volunteering for courses. So we were posted to Germany for most of that with the Queens Own Highlanders. And I would be away on courses, or I'd be deployed somewhere, or I'd be out in the piss with all my single mates. Now I can't remember. I'm sure I probably did when they were younger, but I honestly can't remember reading my two first children bedtime stories. I just can't. I just can't. And I hope to God that maybe I did and I just can't remember it. because if I didn't, when I look back on myself at that age, I'm not particularly proud of that. Second time around, completely different, and I don't know whether it was because I was older or perhaps it might be lots of reasons, but doing all that stuff with my kids, spending time with my kids, and we lived in beautiful Sri Lanka. We lived there for a while, and that was such a great place for kids. And even when we moved back to Scotland, even just going out with a dog walk with my kids, or my son was and still is a big kayaker, does whitewater kayaking to quite a high standard now because he's 19 now. My daughter horse rides now, so it's just every moment I could possibly spend with my children, I spent with them. Do you know? So I'm not sure I'm not sure why that happened. I'm not, and as I say, I said to you at the beginning, DJ, I don't like to blame my own childhood. You know, my parents, my father, my mother. I don't like to sort of use that as an excuse for me being a shit father. I think maybe perhaps one of the reasons I was a better father the second time around has got a lot to do with my wife at the time, with their mother. I think it's got a lot of reason to do with that because she was and still is a great mother. Or maybe it was just me. Maybe I was just different. You know what, DJ? I don't know. I really don't know. But the anger that I felt when I came back from Afghanistan, I didn't feel around them. When I was around them, I didn't feel it. And it was only anger that I felt. I didn't I've never professed to having PTSD. I've never professed I've never I've just I think I'm a little bit old school. I think perhaps I use the excuse that the reason I'm getting angry is because I'm getting older. And I can probably say that now. There was a marked difference in my behaviour when I started coming home from Afghanistan, especially when I lived in the UK. And it all came tumbling down on me when I had been back in Afghanistan for about 2 or 3 days, and I woke up to a text message from my wife saying, "Don't go mental." And when your wife says that, when your wife says, "Don't go mental," and there's a big but coming. So she says, "Don't go mental, but you need to check your emails." So I got up, checked my emails, and my sister, who had always sort of wanted to be this sort of matriarch of the family. That's how she sort of positioned herself. She took it upon herself to write me this big, massive email. And not only that, but everybody else joined in. So her husband, her daughter, my niece. It was like a fucking intervention, and even to that, and I've kept the email to this day. I've kept it. I don't know why I've kept it. I don't know why. And I read it, and I wanted to kill everybody and everything. And it was more or less an email saying, when you were back the last time, none of us seen you. You didn't come down and spend any time with anybody. You're always angry. You're always really argumentative. You don't spend time here. You don't do this. You don't do that. We think that you need help. We think that you've got a problem. You're a very hard person to love. And then it was all about them, how they were hurt. They felt disappointed. They didn't understand. They didn't know this. There was nothing about, what the fuck are you going through, Neil? Nothing. And that kind of tipped me over a little bit. That kind of tipped me over. It got me down quite a lot, and angry. It doesn't get me angry anymore, but I felt so, I think, betrayed. I felt so betrayed and misunderstood by my entire family, apart from my wife, obviously, who was furious about it. But my wife and I had talked about my anger. She had talked about that. She knew about it. She was saying, right, you just need to, go do some gardening or something like that. But it just felt like betrayal from my sister, my only sibling. And I think what angered me the most, though, was that everybody else chimed in, but they were all agreeing with my sister, which she probably loved. And I felt this rage rising up inside me because they didn't know, they didn't understand why I was angry. I didn't understand why I was angry, but I thought it best to stay away. So that's why I didn't go into town to see them a lot. But I'd always said to them, listen, guys, why don't you come up my house? We've got a massive big house. Why don't you come up it's only 3 miles away. But no, I always had to go to theirs. And because I didn't want to go into town, because there was so many triggers, there was so many people that just made me angry because they were doing stupid shit, that I just decided to stay at home. And my wife was working, so I was like, okay, I'll get the Hoover out, I'll clean the house, I'll do the dishes, I'll cut the grass, I'll spend some time in the garden, or I'll take the dogs a walk, or I'll do something. And I was happy. I wasn't angry. I was happy. And I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought, well, you know what? There's no point in me going down and just being angry with everybody. So I'll just stay away. And that came back and bit me in the ass about when I went back to Afghanistan about 2 weeks later. And it just made me, I don't know, exasperated. It made me frustrated that because they all lived in that bubble, that they didn't really understand what it was like. And that was a rotation that there was a couple of things had happened, and I'm not saying that I'm not saying that letter had something to do with it, but maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But it was the closest I ever came to taking my own life that I've ever came to. And a lot of it was anger. A lot of it was sort of self-assessment. Especially in the wee small hours of the night, and I'm whether if I was out on patrol, so I maybe sleeping in some village somewhere, or in the back of the truck, or even back on a fob, I would just lie awake at night and just think, I wonder if they're all right. I wonder if they're right. Maybe they're right. Maybe it is me. Maybe there's something wrong with me. And then I would start self-assessing that. And then I would start thinking about other things that maybe my wife had said, or maybe my kids had said. And then things are starting to snowball now. And things that aren't even there now become big things. And I got myself so worked up. I started to have like panic attacks whenever I used to jump in the Ranger vehicles, because we used to when we went out, we used to jump in Ranger vehicles and just sort of drive around and go to Shuras and stuff like that. And I found myself having a panic attack, but not on the outside, all internal. Outside was completely calm. Inside, I'm screaming. I couldn't. I wanted out the car. I just couldn't do it. And then it's just one of those. I mean, there's nothing you can do about this. You've got a job to do. Get the job done. You can sort it out when you get back. Etc. Etc. But it never kind of works. You put a lid on it for a little while. That's just going to boil over and boil over and boil over. And we had a particularly sort of difficult 3-4 weeks. There was some stuff that went on that was quite traumatic. And I had all this other crap going on in my head about I'd failed everybody. The only thing that I'm good at is my job. It's the only thing. That's what people are going to remember me. Why? Well, do you know what? He was a pretty shit father. He was a pretty shit husband, terrible brother, but he was good at his job. And that was kind of going through my head. And I came in. We came in from a job, and I walked into my container. I slid my back down on the floor. I sat down. I took my pistol out, stuck it in my mouth, and I had my finger kind of on the trigger, and my eye caught the 2 photographs of my kids on my computer desk, right behind my pistol. And that's the only thing that stopped me doing it. It's the only thing that stopped me doing it. And then after that, I've never considered that before ever again. I've never considered it ever again. So I don't know what got me there. I don't know what got me out. I don't know whether it was Afghanistan. I don't know whether it was something else, or whether it was just a big cocktail of Afghanistan getting under my skin. And I'm not really I have moments of altruism, DJ. I have moments. I think everybody has moments of altruism. But I was completely realistic with my own personal opinion of how Afghanistan would end. I was completely realistic about how it would end. There's not going to be big girls' universities. It's not going to be a democratic country. It just wasn't that. And that was as far back as when I first arrived there. But at the end of 2010, I kind of knew that. And I had been there before. I had been there like 2006. So I had a quite a pragmatic approach to, how all this, whenever it does end, how it's going to end. I never had a romantic view of how Afghan finishes. And yet it still got under my skin. And I don't know why. I don't know why. It was such a beautiful. There was moments where I physically didn't want to be anywhere else on the planet. I wanted to be there. There was just moments, and there was moments where I hated it. I hated Afghans, all Afghans. I hated them. I had so much contempt for them. And then there was moments where I almost like a love for them. As crazy as that sounds. So I don't know, swings and roundabouts perhaps. I don't know. But Afghanistan has never really left me. I don't wake up. I don't get flashbacks. I don't get nightmares. I don't wake up screaming. I'm very, very fortunate. I don't jump at the sound of a car backfiring. I run a firearms training company, for God's sake. I'm on the range all the time. Loud noises don't really sort of do anything for me. It's almost like therapy for me. To get on a range is like therapy for me. Which doesn't surprise me, because whenever I used to leave home and go back to Afghanistan, I was never angry. And I think it's something to do with the people that I was around. It was like, because everybody, whether you're on a fob, either a big fob or a small cop, with 12 people in them, it doesn't really matter. Everybody was in the same boat. You knew that every single person around you was the same. We had the same dark humour, even though as a Brit. And it used to cause so much confusion to the US military when they would see a Brit. If I was just coming back in from a 3-4 day, let's call it a task, and coming back into a fob, and then this Brit gets out the Ranger vehicle with a pair of jeans on and an old shirt and a DeMarco or an M19 or something like that. And it used to people freak out about that. And then I used to tell people what I did, and every handover takeover that units come in, I would have to tell them the same story. When I first went over there, it was 101st Airborne, and then the 82nd came in, and then 10th Mountain arrived, and then I think 341 Infantry came in. I think that might have been the last unit that I was there. I think maybe the 82nd came back a second time. But it was like people were coming back and they were going, "Are you still here?" So when I used to try and explain myself to, in the S2 shop or to commanding officers, this is, and I had my DOD card. It's like, how does a Brit get to work for the DOD in this capacity? Have you got US security clearance? I was like, yeah, well, of course I've got US security clearance because of the job that I'm doing. And they couldn't get their head around the fact that I've got a SIPR account, that a Brit has got a SIPR account. It's like, what? Why have you got a SIPR account? So I used to have to explain myself to everybody. But then once they got to know me, and once the intelligence reports came in, then things got better, and they understood what it was that we did. But just about every unit were always really skeptical that came in, because my team were Afghans. I didn't, although I lived with US forces and in the FOBs and stuff like that, my team were Afghans, and I'm a Brit, so I understand the skepticism. I understand the sort of the confusion of some people. But once we got to know each other, and once they understood, or once they got the product, especially if it was exploitable, then things changed, and we got on really well, and we ended up getting we would get some tasks from them, and we got some really good results. We got some people put down, we got some people picked up, due to reporting, our reporting, which was great for me personally. It was great for the program, and it was great for the Afghans because they seen how it worked. They seen how, if you do this job, if you do this, agent handling, recruiting, cultivation and recruitment, if you do it properly, you can get great results. But as I say, I don't know. I think maybe Afghanistan changed me, maybe, but it's I suppose it's easy to say that retrospectively, because I don't know if I hadn't done that job, I don't know where I would have gone. I don't know what else I would have done. But I don't regret a minute of it. I mean, Afghanistan was my life for 6 years, 6 solid straight years. It was my life, and even now I see what's happening now in Afghanistan, and it's not that it fills me with rage. I kind of, I find myself just nodding at the TV. Yep, kind of knew that would happen. You know, and I think everybody did. Everybody knew that this would happen the way it's gone now. Everybody knew that.
Everybody
But
at
there
the
was,
lower levels, I think the upper level guys really convinced themselves of the bullshit they were telling themselves.
yep,
They were believing their own hype.
I think you're right, Chuck.
So Chuck, I know that you want to talk about a lot of this, so I want to kind of turn it over to you to ask some questions here.
Yes, I want to get your thoughts on a word that hasn't been in circulation for a long time, but I think it goes along with you getting angry in Afghanistan and some of the things that I've just found, like when you're in an environment to where a lot of times you're hyper aware or your senses are a little bit different, I think that affects your mind. And I think what I've found too is that coming out of those environments, it was hard for me to switch off from that. And then going back is when I felt better. So because it becomes normal. So I go back to Afghanistan or go to Iraq or wherever. And now I feel like I'm back in my element. But then when you come home, that's when you feel out of your element because you're not in that, I wouldn't say always hyper aware, but you're just in this state of mind that's just completely different. Um, and now people are using this word called stress inoculation to kind of get around that. And I kind of want to get your thoughts on that.
So I've never I've never been paranoid. I'm not sure if that's what you mean, but I mean when I used to come back, when I was working in Northern Ireland, I was always on edge. Not on edge. That sounds as if I'm driving around or I'm living my life, you know, looking over my shoulder and all that. It was never like that, but
You switched on though, right? You're like,
but I was always armed. Even when I wasn't working, I was always armed. Um, I mean, I went for a funny enough, I went for a kilt fitting. I went to get fit in Belfast. I went to get fitted for a kilt, and didn't forget, because you don't forget that you've got a pistol on you. But I kind of forgot. I kind of forgot that I had a little 7 round SIG, 223 maybe no 229, little 7 round SIG, and an inside the waistband holster. And I forgot I had it on when the seamstress went to put the tape measure around my waist, and I immediately remembered just as she's about to come round my waist, and I just made an excuse that I don't like that one. I want to get another one and stuff, and so. But I was always armed in Northern Ireland to the point where it's not that you forget that that I've got something on. It's just it becomes part of you. It used to freak me out when I never carried. So if I went back to the mainland, if I went back to Scotland, you know, on holiday or to see family, then obviously I wasn't armed. And that's when it felt awkward because I wasn't armed. I felt naked. I would sit in the car, or I would walking around, and I would thinking, this doesn't feel right. I'm walking funny. I'm not. I'm walking in a different gait. This doesn't. I don't like this. This isn't. And then when I went back to work, and I went back to the compound, I would get all my guns, put them in my hold all, and then and strap, get myself strapped again. And it's like, right now, okay, now balance is back. I've got balance back. But I was when I wasn't working, I was never paranoid. I didn't when I was back in Scotland off duty. I didn't do any counter surveillance or anti surveillance when I was driving. I didn't get spooked because a car was behind me for 3 turns. I didn't. Well, the fact that I was aware of that, maybe I was doing it, but it didn't. It didn't spook me. Do you know? But there were certain things that I used to do. I used to always reverse park. I never nosy parked. I used to always kind of walk out a house or walk out a building, and just before I walked to my car, I would just look around. I'm a smoker, so I can do that. I can just stand and light a cigarette and just look around. I used to always do that. or before I get out a car, I would do the exact same thing and just mess around in my car and have a look around. I used to drive in a certain way. I know they do it here a lot in America, but in the UK, people stop bumper to bumper at stoplights and stuff like that. People stop bumper to bumper, and I never done that. I always used to leave that tyres on tarmac, no matter where I was. Or if I was driving on a country road, I used to always drive that advanced system of driving, the way that I'd been taught on my advanced driving course. So, and back in the UK, it's a little bit different. So, going round the left hand bend, I would be as far right as I could. Going round the right hand bend, I'd be as far left as I could. I'd be up and down the gears like Nicky Lauda, and I done that because I enjoyed doing it. I don't think I did it because I was paranoid. I'm going to say I've always sort of tried to switch off when I've been home on leave, but that's not particularly true because I couldn't do it in Afghanistan. I couldn't do it, not all the time. But no, I've never found myself being paranoid or anxious when I get home. When I got home from ops, it was only it was just the anger. That was my only problem, was the anger, and that stopped as soon as I went back. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I suppose I wanted to do the whole walk across America thing. I wanted to go and get that done because there was so many people that I had worked with, US soldiers from all these units that I mentioned. So many people that I found out later had gone home, or they'd been sent home because they rolled a 666 and they were just sent home, or somebody would email me and say, did you hear about Tom? It's like, no. What about him? He took his own life 3 days ago, and it's just like, Jesus. And this was constant. This was it wasn't every day, but I mean, 2-3 times a month I was getting calls from people or emails from people saying that, this guy's, checked himself in here. This guy's really struggling. This guy's killed himself. Just people that I had known who'd came through those same fobs maybe a year ago or 2 years previously or 3 years previously. Then there was all the injured guys, still like Facebook friends. But there's a couple of guys that sort of spring to mind. Adam Hartswick, Doc Hartswick from 82nd Airborne. It just about lost his limbs, lost an arm, trying to save his guys, and they got hit. It's a really bad day that 82nd Airborne, really bad day. They get hit by a daisy chain of IEDs. Horrible day. So I wanted to do something, and you know how when people say, I'm actually glad in the UK people don't say thank you for your service. People say it to me here. I get really uncomfortable with it, not with them saying it, but with hearing it. Thank you for your service. I chose to serve. Nobody made me serve. I chose to serve. I've always believed that before you take something from your country, you've got to give something to it. I've always believed that. That was something that my cousins and stuff had said to me. You got to give something to your country. You can't just keep taking. So I mean, I was proud to serve. I wanted to serve my country, but I wanted to give back. But I didn't want to. I'd given enough for my country. Quite frankly, I had given enough, and I wanted to give back to other people. I wanted to give back to a community of people that I had served with, and even people that I hadn't served with. but people that had perhaps gone through similar experiences. That's who I wanted to give back to, and I was trying to think of a way with which to do that. And I would donate money to veterans charities, and I felt a little bit of a fraud doing something like that. And I was home on rotation, and I woke up early in the morning, and I just lay in bed, and I came up with this idea about walking across America, and I can't remember why that. I don't know. I think I wanted something that would capture people's imagination. But then, when I went to research it, I found out that so many people have walked across America. People have been walking across America for about 60, 70 years, And I thought, I'm going to be the first one to do it. And it's like, what? Are you stupid? There's been more people who've been walking across America since the 1920s. So, but nonetheless, I thought, I can do that. That will capture the imagination. I can do that. So my wife woke up next to me, and I just blurted it out. I'm going to walk across America to raise money to raise awareness of PTSD amongst American and British soldiers, and I'm going to do it for two charities, one an American charity and a British charity. And she kind of looked at me and was like, "What the fuck are you been? What? That's what I'm going to do." And this must have been about 2014, and I spent a year training. I don't think my wife realised I was going to do it. I think she thought that it's one of those whims, these whims that you wake up with. I'm going to build a shed, and then you don't. I'm going to walk across America. It was like, yeah, of course you are. So and I trained for a year on the FOBs. That was it. And this is another part of my life that I need to just inject into. How did I go from that to that? So I ended up. I left my second wife for Serena. In 2018, and it was a horrible way to do it. They say that you hurt the ones that you love the most, and that would be definitely true of how it happened to me, or how it happened to them, should I say. As a result of that, DJ, I've got a very, very poor relationship with my two younger children now. Those same children that I used to go upstairs and read bedtime stories and go kayaking and go sledging and stuff like that. So my son, who's now 19, doesn't speak to me. Hasn't spoken to me for about 2 years. Hasn't spoken to me before it. Daughter, my amazing horse riding daughter, she will she will text me once a week, and sometimes she'll FaceTime me once a week and something like that. But it has certainly changed our relationship with my children. It just no doubt. Just because of the way that it happened, and the way that it happened was on me. There was nobody else to blame. There was nobody. And again, I'm not going to make any excuses about, Afghanistan really messed me up, man. I'm not that kind of guy. What I will say is that I've always believed, as I've got a little bit older, but it's only as I've got older that I've kind of realised where I've been going my whole life, is I've spent my whole life looking for my place. Now that place, it doesn't have to be a physical place. That place can be a person. That place can be a job. It doesn't have to be. It's where I fit. It's where can I go next? What can I do now? Because when I came back from Afghanistan, back from my walk across America, I was lost. I was lost. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was working for a training company. It wasn't paying particularly well. We were having severe money worries. It was suggested to me to get a proper job. I didn't know what the fuck a proper job was at that point. What's a proper job? I mean, to become an Uber driver? Can you imagine me being an Uber driver? Or do I go and work in a supermarket? Or what am I going to do? I don't know what a proper job is. So yeah, I've just lost. I didn't really like where my life, selfishly, and I'm going to be selfish about this here. I didn't like where my life was going. I wanted more. And then I got into training with this company in Scotland, running close protection courses and stuff like that. I was also doing some work for a consultancy over in Poland at NATO's training headquarters. We were doing advisory training for NATO staff officers who were deploying to Afghanistan for MOD, MOI advisors, Afghan counterpart advisors. So I was doing that maybe every 3-4 months. Maybe I was doing that, going out to Poland for a couple of weeks, which was amazing, great job. But it wasn't enough for me. It just wasn't enough. And then I went to the company that I was working for, sent me to Bulgaria to run courses there, and that's where I met Serena. And I know it all sounds really simplistic. You know, you can't choose who you fall in love with. You can't choose who you fall out of love with, and blah 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 blah. Depending on who you speak to will depend who believes that bullshit or not. Or some people might go, yeah, do you know what? Yeah, you're right, you can. And then some people will go, well, yeah, you know what? You should stay in your marriage for the good of the kids. I've never believed that. I've never believed that. I've told my children that in such a way that if you guys ever get married and you have children and you're not happy in that marriage, I would want you to leave it. I don't want to stay in a marriage that I don't want to be in. Now my wife didn't do anything wrong, you know. So I'm not going to sit here and point the finger. It's like, oh well, we just drifted apart. We didn't. I just wasn't happy, and I wanted more, and that's about as simple as I can put it. And but it ripped my kids' hearts apart, and it's something I'll take to my grave with me. The way that I hurt my children, I will take that to my grave. Nothing can fix that. Nothing's going to ever be able to fix that. And it's only in the last maybe in the last 2 years, I've kind of made peace with the fact that my younger children, they're probably not going to have a relationship with me as they get older because of what happened, because of what I did. And I've had this conversation with Serena as well because, you know, and I've said to her, listen, there's a hole in my heart that you can't fill. It can only be filled by my children. That's it. So, you know, you're never going to get all my heart because there's a bit of it in there that's only for my children. There's nobody else can fill that. And that's kind of where I am with my children. And I don't know. I just, when I think back in it, and I do think back in it quite a lot. I do think back to 2018. I am how I done it, how it happened. I'm so fucking ashamed, so ashamed of myself. Do you know? it just I don't know. That's I don't really know how else to explain that. I don't really know. I'm just so everything that's happened consequently has all been as a result of that. That being said, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you now if I'd stayed in Scotland. I would never have opened up Go Noisy. Would never have came to America. I don't even know what I'd be doing. Now, some people, if people are listening to this, some people will say, "Well, that's more important. It's more important that you, you've had your career, you've had your life, you now stay and you with your family, with your children, and stuff like that." I take my hat off to anyone that can do that. I will take my hat off and I've got a lot of respect for anybody that can tell themselves at the age that I was at, 50 years old. Right, that's your life over. You're now going to spend the rest of your life, doing a mundane job that you probably hate, 9 to 5, and that's you over. That's it. I couldn't get my head around that. I had more to offer. I knew I had more to offer. So when Serena and I met, we were out one day, and I was still working for this other company, and I was just talking about, why am I doing all the work? Why am I doing all the work? But they're getting all the money. So we were sitting, we were having a couple of drinks. We were actually having having a bit of an afternoon on a Saturday afternoon with some Long Island iced teas in the centre of Sofia in Bulgaria, and we just talked about opening up a company, and then we talked about what name, and then we came up with Go Noisy, because that was kind of when I was an undercover soldier, that was kind of our voice procedure on the radio. India's going noisy, Red 45. It's just a way of saying India's, I think India's going loud or contact or whatever it is, but India's going noisy, Red 45. So we set up Go Noisy, and we wanted to keep it raw. We wanted to keep it messy. And the majority of my career it's all been urban based, apart from Afghanistan, but it's all been kind of urban based. So whether it be Northern Ireland, whether it be Libya, or whether it be, or even in Baghdad, in Sri Lanka, and in Eastern Europe, when I was working for JSG over there, and we were chasing war criminals and organised crime gangs all over the Balkans. So it's always been vehicle, foot, street scene based, which throws up a lot of challenges. So we wanted the training to reflect that. We wanted to revolve the training around those street scene gunfights, because there's a lot of myths about, and I've had this conversation with so many people before, DJ, when they talk about your initial reaction to a gunfight in a street scene, if you're in a vehicle, is just you either drive through or reverse out. It's like, well, what do you do if you can't? You can't just have that as your SOP. So what do you do? And what happens if you've got other people in the car? What happens and people talk about just do a J-turn, just do a handbrake turn. I've never done a J-turn in my life. I've never done a handbrake turn operationally in my life, because every time I've been driving in every operational theatre, the road hasn't allowed it. Other road users haven't allowed it. So you can't do that either. And then what happens if you can't even get your door open because some other road user has pulled alongside your car so close that you can't get your door open? So then what happens? Then how do you get out? And it's all these little things that nobody really wants to throw into training, because then it becomes too complicated. And then what happens is you get training that is based on no realism whatsoever. And you get training that doesn't work. And all training, whether it be firearms training, whether it be infantry training, whether it be medical training, it's all got to be functional. It's got to be role specific. So the same tactics that would be used in Afghanistan, you can't use them in a street. There's got to be something different. And I have countless discussions with law enforcement officers down here about walking backwards. When law enforcement officers go and do a random vehicle stop, and they go up to the driver's window, and the driver pulls a firearm, then yeah, I mean you're getting out the way. But for me, that's something different. So because I wouldn't be going backwards in that situation, I'd be going either left or right. Hopefully, right behind, because the driver's that way. But I wouldn't be going straight back. So I've had this conversation with people about, have you ever tried walking backwards on a normal street? Have you ever tried walking backwards and firing in a normal street? Because you've got so many things behind you. You've got so many things on the ground, or you've got people behind you. So I try and there's nothing that I won't teach. So I'm not one of those instructors, DJ, that will say you should never do that, because there are too many variations of a gunfight, of a firefight. There are too many variations to be able to say with any confidence that something shouldn't be done. The aims of Go Noisy was to provide response options, because no two incidents are the same. So you can't have one generic drill for an incident. You've got to have options, but options that work, options that make sense. Nothing that's too complicated, because when that happens, if it's too complicated, you won't get there. It's got to be something simple, and generally, the most simplest options are the best ones anyway. So that's what we wanted Go Noisy to be. We wanted it to be a little bit raw. We are certainly not, and me personally, I'm not a firearms purist. We used to run a bar in Afghanistan called the Taliban. I'm not sure if I sent you a photograph of it,
You
DJ,
did.
but we had it in our little compound, and we used to get some guys in. We get guys in from the S2 shop. We'd bring some guys over from the ODA. They'd come over, but we put up a big sign in the Taliban. We put a big picture up of the Queen, and we put bar rules up in a big glass case. And the first rule was that we put up was only the Queen's English is spoken in this bar. And that was a little dig at our American friends. And then the second rule was, anybody starts talking about calibers or barrel rifling or grain weights or barrel lengths, anyone starts talking about that, they're in the chair of shame. And we had this chair of shame that we used to, put people in for 20 seconds, and people would just point at them and laugh, and then they would come out again, because we wanted it to be somewhere people could just come and just relax and have a near beer. So I say that because there are people out there, even around that come and train in this facility, that have got a better understanding of firearms than I do. They're more scientific about firearms than I am. I care little. I'm probably not doing myself any favors here. I care little about muzzle velocity. I care little. I don't really care if there's a threat that's 100 meters from me. I will probably run away. That's what I'll probably do. If there's a threat that's 10 metres away, now that's something different. But 100 metres away, I don't even know if I would engage that, depending on the circumstances. So we wanted to keep it a little bit raw. We didn't want to get bogged down in the puritanical application of firearms training. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel, and we wanted to give people functional training that they could remember, training that when it was given contextual depth. And the only way to give contextual depth into any training is to tell a story about it. That's the only way to give contextual depth. So I don't teach things like room clearing, because I've never cleared a room in my life. I would never teach room clearing. I don't teach that. I like to stick to stuff that I know what I'm doing, or that's happened to me, because I've done something, and then I can use that to add contextual depth to that training. So that's what we kind of wanted for Go Noisy to be. I'm not a businessman. I'll tell you that right now. But we had some success in Bulgaria. Not great, but we were doing okay for a new company. Most of our clients were ex-Brit Mill, or still serving in the army. We done some private stuff as well for some people who were going to Afghanistan, deploying with private security companies, stuff like that, and wanted to come and get some training. And then COVID hit. Just as we were starting to kind of get off the ground, then COVID hit 2020, and it killed us. I mean, not literally, but it killed our business almost overnight. And we were at the mercy. We were at the mercy of certainly the British government, because most of our students, our clients, were from the UK, and they couldn't travel to Bulgaria because Bulgaria was red, or there was a 2-week quarantine when they returned. And then we went through this crazy time where there was different countries in Europe that were going green, amber, red, red, green, amber, red. And we literally couldn't keep track. And a couple of courses, we ended up getting in touch with all the students on a course. Poland had just went green. And we said to them, get yourself to Poland. And Serena and I threw our stuff in the back of the car, threw all our range gear in the back of the car, threw the dog in the back of the car, and we drove from Bulgaria all the way through Serbia, through the Czech Republic, Hungary, and then into Poland to run a course. And then when we got to Poland went red. And then Bulgaria went green. And it's just like, what the fuck is going on? So we tried to negotiate that, or we managed that throughout 2020. And by the end of 2020, we kind of realized we can't run a business this way. No one knows when this is going to end. Nobody knows. We can't justify expecting people to come over here and then go back to the UK and go into 5-10 days quarantine. We just can't justify that. And at that time, we were watching what was happening in America. It had always been our plan to come to the States, but just not then, maybe in about 5 years' time. But we were watching what was happening in America, and people were still training. I was seeing posts on social media from companies that were still training. Texas and Florida, West Virginia, North Carolina. They were all still training, albeit with some restrictions and with some, mitigating procedures. And then we decided, okay, let's think about this. What do? We can't survive. I mean, we were in 2018, 2019. I think we ran something like 23 courses. In 2019, 2020, we ran 6. 2021, I think we ran 4. I mean, we were struggling. We were proper struggling to pay bills, to pay the rent, because there was no money coming in because we weren't running courses. I mean, thank God I was still working for NATO at the time, and that was kind of bringing in some money. And then Serena's father passed away. She was never close to him, hadn't seen him in years and years, and had found out that he was sick, and they had rekindled that relationship because he didn't have long left, and he passed away, and he left her his apartment in Sofia, and she sold it, and the proceeds of that brought us here, and I arrived here August 21. Yeah, August 2021. I arrived here, and I love what I was saying about where your place is, or who your place is, or what your place is. So 2 things: Serena's my place, and doing what I do, doing what I love doing is my place. The only thing that's missing in my life right now, the only thing that's missing is my 2 younger children. My 2 older children, they speak to me all the time. In fact, Jesus, I can't get my oldest son to not message me. It's the only one aspect of my life that is not complete, and that's my 2 younger children. And I'm working on that. I try and work on that. How do I fix that? How do I fix that? Because if I can get that back, as certainly from me being me, from me, and I can now look back on my professional life. Let's call it that, my career, my professional life, and I now know that this is always where I should be. I know guys that left the army, done 22 years, 24 years in the army, and they went on to become pipe fitters, welders, roofers. They left the military behind completely, and I love that. I love that they've managed to do that. I never was able to do that. I didn't want to do that. I always wanted to do what I was good at and do what I loved doing. And for me now, having a firearms company, running tactical firearms training in America, that is, for me, that's a boyhood dream for me. I would never have believed, if somebody had said to me 10 years ago, in 2023, Neil, you'll be living in Florida running a firearms training company. I would never have believed them. Now that I'm here doing it, or trying to do it, should I say, I love it. I love it. That this is my job. This is going to be my job until the day I die. And it will probably put me in an early grave, to be honest with you, because the last 2 years have been torture. But I love it. I love it here, and I love what I do. I love how I've got here, I suppose.
Well, it's an amazing story. Everywhere you've been, everything that you've done to end up here and do this. I want people to know where they can find you. GoNoisy.com. It is Specialized Tactical Training Solutions. Once again, GoNoisy.com. Also, Neely, can you give your LinkedIn where they can find you?
Sure. You can get us on LinkedIn. It's either Neely Davis or it's Go Noisy USA LLC. So I have my own page in that one.
Well, there you go. And you could go down to Florida, have a little sun, little drink, and have some great training. Chuck, is there anything that you want to add in?
Yeah, I just want to give one tidbit about Scotland so nobody else makes this mistake and get Neil's take on this. So I've only been to Scotland once. I was in Edinburgh for 6 days. I got stuck there coming back from Syria and went to a bar, and I just asked the questions like, hey, you got Ireland, you've got Scotland, you've got England, but on this side of the water, you kind of consider everybody considers themselves to be English, right? And then the music literally stopped, and there was a lot of angry people. And people sat down and basically took me through the whole Scottish history and how I should never, ever repeat that in Scotland.
Yeah, I can imagine the darts. The darts are flying through the air and they just stop in midair. Yeah, lots of people go into a flat spin about stuff like that. I kind of don't. I make a joke about it. If somebody thinks something that I'm from England, people in Scotland can be very fickle when it comes to England. There's but.
Well, you can always count on Chuck to point those things out. That's why we have him on here. He points out those little known facts to get people through their lives. So, Chuck, thank you for that. Neely, amazing story. Chuck, thank you so much for helping me. Guys, go check him out. GoNoisy.com. He teaches it down and dirty. He teaches you how it's supposed to be. Now, you know where you can find Neely. You know where you can find Chuck. Here's where you can find me. You can find me on Instagram at the DTD_podcast. You can find me on Facebook at the DTD podcast. And you can find me on YouTube where all these conversations are in video form. You can also stop at the one-stop shop. That's dtdpodcast.net. That's audio form, video form. Neely's got his own page with all of his pictures. Chuck's got his own page with all his pictures. But you can go there to find out everywhere you get in touch with this guy and where you can find his training at. It's all going to be on his episode page on the channel. Now, if you go there, you'll also be able to go to the blog site and see an article that was recently written about this podcast as being one of the top ones that you should check out right now. So make sure you go to dtdpodcast.net, check all that out. Now let's talk about our amazing sponsors, Mac Belts and Police Coffee. We all know that nothing stands up to wear and tear like a good leather belt. If you're looking for the toughest leather belt on earth, then you've come to the right place, Mac Belts. They're handcrafted in the USA by veterans who are serious about their craft. And if you're looking for a belt that's tough enough for your active lifestyle and helps support those who have given so much to our country, look no further than Mac Belts. It's the toughest belt on the planet. But let's talk about the buckle. It consists of 100 plus grams of unbreakable American stainless steel. It's engineered, designed, and assembled in USA built machines. Backed by a multi-generation warranty, expertly engineered to combine modern precision for rugged use. And you can always mix that with the Kalahari belt. It's hand-cut from their veg tan full-grain saddle leather, dyed to a classic saddle tan. It's contoured with black UV resistance parallel border stitch, handmade right here in the USA by veterans and designed by a Special Forces operator. You can find all this and so much more at macbelts.com. Now let's talk coffee. Police Coffee is an award-winning and officer-owned, dedicated business to crafting the finest coffees and blends, and they're shipped as soon as they're made to provide you with the freshest coffee available. Each batch is roasted fresh by people who know what it means to stay vigilant. And their specialty coffees do not waste one drop when flavor's concerned. Their coffee's some of the best you'll find, but it also serves an important cause, and this is the one that I say every week. It gives back to our community. 50% of their profits go towards helping family members of police officers who fell in the line of duty. And guess what? We got a flavor selection. One Ranger. It's the newest flavored coffee that you're sure to love. It's flavorful, medium-bodied coffee with a smooth and sweet pecan flavor. Pecan coffee is probably the best combination in the world. The pecan's rich, sweet, nutty, and buttery flavor cuts through the coffee's natural acidity to give you a smooth and satisfying coffee experience. You can find all these and so many other flavors, K-Cups, mugs, and swag, all at policecoffee.com. And just ask my man Chuck. He loves their coffee. Guys, that's going to be it for this week. Neely, thank you so much. Chuck, thank you. Like I said, that's Neely, that's Chuck. Check us out on our next show. I'm DJ. We're out of here. See you later.